Welcome to American Gypsy Podcast. I am your host, Gypsy, and today we have a special guest, Ophira Eisenberg. She is a comedian, writer, NPR host, and host of Parenting is a Joke podcast. Welcome to the show, Ophira.
Thank you so much. Nice to see you.
Glad to have you here. Now, I know you're in New York now, but you moved there from Canada. And I heard
Correct.
somewhere that you moved there with nothing,
Yeah,
which is
like an
something
idiot.
like, which is something that I'm known for doing, and I actually just did that recently. So can you talk about that experience a little bit and what inspired you to do that?
It absolutely. And I will, the one thing that really occurs to me now, especially in New York, is that you can't do that anymore.
Mm,
Just in general, like you can't move to New York with nothing. Most people move
yeah.
here with nothing, and I say in air quotes because what I mean by that is a apartment that their parents have bought them. That
Mm.
is the nothing of now. So, yeah, I was living in Toronto and I was pursuing stand-up comedy, and I really wanted to just, delusionally, I think, wanted to see if I could fare in a larger pond. And I had my sights. I guess I could have gone to LA. I had my sights on New York. I think I did my entire life. And you know what I will blame that on? Growing up on Sesame Street.
Yeah, New
I was
York
like,
is a
where is that?
comedy city, so that makes sense.
Right. So, yeah, I came from a family that was by no means rich. We, had food on the table and clothes on our body, and I was even given ballet lessons as a kid, which was such a big deal to have. So, and I was reminded about it every day that it was such a big deal that could give me ballet lessons. Did not become a ballerina. Just to be clear, lessons gone to waste. No, they did not go to waste at all. That was, I'm so glad I had those years of ballet. So I always worked. I worked through high school. I worked through college. I did get a lot of loans for college. And then I was working jobs while I was starting to do stand-up comedy. And I just decided I knew a friend here who said I could sleep in her, like crash. I could crash at her apartment for a while. And I literally just grabbed a couple bags. Got rid of my apartment. I was living with roommates, so just the room. And none of my furniture meant anything. Futons and, dressers I had taken off the street anyway. So that just went back out into the street. And I had clothing and, whatever books and stuff like that that I put in boxes that went into a friend's basement, which by the way was flooded. So that stuff's just gone. That's how it works sometimes.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I came to New York and on top of and had nothing. And on top of having nothing and some cash to I basically feed myself, but I lived on nothing. Except for I immediately started working for another acquaintance friend who had a retail store in the village and needed a retail person. And she was paying me cash. And I say this now under the table. And because I didn't have a work permit, I think she was going to pay
Mm,
people under the cash anyways, under the table anyways, but I didn't have a work permit. And that was an added sort of problem.
mm.
But I sort of did it from that point of view because I had no other choices. I just had to do it or not do it. I didn't know any better. I honestly didn't know enough of of what it was like to fail. I didn't have anything. It's kind of amazing when you don't have anything, you have less to lose.
Yeah, you really learn a lot from these experiences too.
Yeah, and then, and then I did spend a lot of sleepless nights trying to figure stuff out, and it was not easy. And looking back now on all the time and effort I had to put into, you know, actually just becoming a legitimate person with a visa in the States, that was a huge thing, huge undertaking. It is not easy, and took years and years and years of different kinds. But even just getting an apartment in New York, uh, finding just places to live. You can get a job in a place like New York faster than you'll get a place to live because
Mm.
housing is such, well, you're in Seattle now,
Yeah.
housing is hard.
Even living in LA, I had to learn that. Yeah, it's hard to find a place to live.
It's very hard to find a place to live. Yeah.
Did you always wanted to be a comedian, or is
I
that
don't, I
something
don't,
that started with?
I should say yes, right? That's what you want to hear from every comedian. Yes.
Not really.
Uh, but I think, you know what, honestly, I think I didn't know that was an option at all. And part of that was just the kind of household I grew up in. And part of that was I didn't see a lot of women in it. So that, standard thing of if you don't see yourself in it, it's very hard to picture it. As I got a little older, I was aware of like Carol Burnett and not necessarily stand up, but obviously in the comedy field, well known in the comedy field, and Joan Rivers, but didn't relate to it at all. Maybe Rita Rudner, but I wasn't really aware that that was something out for me. I did feel like I wanted to perform, and I felt like I wanted to like write personal stories and tell personal stories. I just didn't know how or where. And I knew I wasn't an actor. I kind of wish I would have gone to acting school because I just think that would be cool and fun. And I guess I still can. But I wasn't like drawn to that, stepping into another character. I was very much like, I wanted to tell my story.
And now that you've had some experience in the industry, do you feel like it is challenging for women in this industry?
Yes. Again, I wish I could say no. Yes. And, from my point of view, it was really challenging when I started stand up. Now, when I started stand up in Canada, I was an amateur, and there seemed to be a lot of other women that were starting out, and it actually did not occur to me at all that it was a very sexist business. A lot of the gatekeepers and bookers, I think they were all men, but there was just a couple that I was dealing with on that level. And that did seem like a boys' club. But again, I was young enough or naive enough, what age is irrelevant. You can be naive at any age to just think that was, I don't know, I saw that everywhere. I saw men in those top positions everywhere. So I didn't in a way question it. It took me years to question that more.
What?
And then when I came to New York, I was very aware that there was not a lot of, not this, like that it was, the men were being favored. There was fewer women. They were the women were all great, but they were not getting the jobs in the writing rooms. They were not getting looked at for things. One was allowed to rise of all of these amazing women. And I think about this a lot because when I came to New York, I ran in a circle of some great comics that we're all just starting out doing bar shows, indie shows, maybe some at the clubs. And a lot of the women were just so great, better than I ever was, truly, I think. And so many of the guys in that scene, great too. They did go on to have jobs and careers and stuff. And so many of the women quit because there was no place for them.
Do you feel
And
like that's changed over the years?
I felt like I mean, it's a little bit better where they do, for example, staff writing rooms with a few more women. They're much more conscious of just diversity in general in writing rooms and not just it being, seven white men and we're good to go for every show. So I feel like there's a much more of a mind's eye on that. And I think there are more women out there that are making a living, but not nowhere. I feel like it got a little better, honestly. And then I feel like it got weirdly worse.
Mm.
Like there was a moment, and I don't want to slap everything, align it all to a candidate becoming president or not, but I felt like there was a moment where it was like, oh yeah, no, like this is we're getting so much closer the way that we should have be talking about this for years, and people are so much more open, and most importantly, audiences are asking for this. Audiences are asking for more women on stage, more diversity on stage. They don't want to see 10 white guys in hoodies in a row. They want to see themselves reflected. They want to see other
Yeah.
experiences. And I, and then I feel like it took a step back, and maybe it just got a more fractioned or factioned, both, I'm going to say, where it's like you can go there if you want to see this, and you can go there if you want to consume that, but it should be it should be a mainstream universal.
Yeah. That's one of the things I liked about your stand-up. I got to see you a couple of weeks ago, and even your podcast, Parenting is a Joke. You do need a diverse set of people in this industry, because it's more storytelling. I like your style of storytelling, and it's more relatable to a different audience that
Thank
men
you.
can't necessarily provide.
Thank you.
A
Yeah, and and
different kind of parent.
yeah, right. And I think too, they're like, for example, when comics go out on the road, um like I had the advantage in one of the shows I did recently, you can have an opener, and a lot of times people bring their friend. They bring their friend. And then sometimes, like recently there was a woman that had reached out to the venue who's a local comic that asked if she could open for me, which I always kind of like, because then you're supporting like a local scene. And I wasn't familiar with her work before that because I wouldn't have known her just because she was local. Um, but what ends up, and I like that. And I feel like when I talk to other female headliners, they're always talking about like, oh, I like to try to get this person to open for me, or I like try to do outreach in the community, or I like to try to give someone a chance that does not often get a chance. And then I'm making this like I'm complaining, but too bad. And then sometimes I'm like, oh, the guys just bring their pals, and it's very closed, and it will just continue to be closed, and it will continue to be that boys club that is impenetrable. And like, why? It just
Yeah.
makes everything like, well, there's that on one side of the world, and then there's all these people kind of struggling on the other side of the world. Why?
Right. What is something about being a comedian that you feel like most people don't see or understand?
There is the sort of stereotype of, oh, it must be a laugh a minute in your home,
Hmm.
right? Or like
Right.
if we go up for cocktails, it is just like, I am going to be entertained. No, no, you're not.
Like you're
I mean,
supposed to be on all the time.
yeah, like trust me, I like to have a good time too. But I am once I have done entertaining, like there's other facets to my personality and what I enjoy, and also, yeah, I am not someone, I think most comics aren't on, and I think even most comics when they're off stage are introverts. I don't necessarily relate to that, but they are even like to the point of being socially awkward, like the absolute opposite of someone you want to have a drink with after a show.
Yeah,
So I
that's
think, yeah, so I think there's like always this conflict, like, confusion of just like who you are on stage is who you are off stage. Often, even though my stuff is 100% autobiographical, because it's through the voice, the lens of doing stand-up comedy, people will come up to me afterwards and go, so is that real? Like, is all that stuff real? Do you really have an 8-year-old son? And I'm like, you think I would fabricate? But I think there's also, because it could be everything I could say. I could be like the most unbelievable fictional writer on the planet and just craft an entire stand-up act that was false, possible. But no, that is most people, I think too, is there, especially the vibe right now in stand-up, are writing really truthful stuff about what they're going through.
Do you practice some of your stuff on your family?
Not so much. Definitely not on my 8-year-old son, because he thinks I'm the most unfunny person that has ever walked the planet. And sometimes he goes, oh, I kind of heard you on the phone saying a joke, and I don't get it, Mom. None of your stuff makes any sense. I'm like, thanks. And sometimes I put it past my husband, but I always feel like he is too dead set on being supportive, which is great. So it's like maybe not the read I'm looking for, but I do Zooms with a couple different comics who are friends, and we literally like set out an hour and trade bits that we are trying to work on and
That's
figure
cool.
out. And also sometimes, a lot of people do this. You do a voice recording on your phone or whatever you have, and then sometimes we'll send it to each other and be like, "Do you think this makes any sense?" Or yeah, because you can't really rehearse. That is true. There's the only way
Yeah.
you can get it right is to do it in front of an audience.
Have you ever had like a traumatic experience on stage, like being booed off or a
I've never
bad?
been, have I ever been booed off? I've never been booed off. I have failed I have bombed and failed on stage so many times. So many times. Oh my goodness. It's part of the process, which
Right.
sucks, but that's just what it is. And you're supposed to learn from the failures, and you do, but they sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just go, that was terrible, and you wait for the sting of it to fade. Um, but I only once, I mean, even recently, I could think of like having a bad show and just feeling that like sweat. Oh, I know what it was. I did a show recently where it was a it was a tough setting because you, as a stand-up, you know, I guess that's another great misconception is that people see you in a comedy club, and a comedy club is a very specific set of circumstances. It's dark, you're usually cramped in together. There's a stage that is brightly lit, there's all these things, and you might not think twice about it, but honestly, that scenario has been figured out so comedy can live there. People need to feel
Mm,
anonymous by being put together. It needs to be dark so you feel like you can laugh without being like there's all these different things.
mm,
You have very high ceilings and people spread apart and something very bright, and maybe it's earlier in the afternoon. These things are all going to degrade the and make it harder for the performer.
right.
So I was in a scenario that was a little tough because it was like a kind of a function, like somewhere that you might throw a wedding, but they kind
Mm,
of put a square stage in the middle, and people were having dessert and drinks on white tablecloth, and it was a kind of fancy situation, and I was there to perform. So not the worst, but definitely a little bit harder. And I felt like, oh, it was going great. I really had them. And then I said one joke. It wasn't even that polarizing, but it was me. I am a working mom, and I talk about being a working mom, and I have a lot of jokes about that because also I work at odd hours. So it's speaking to that. And I think the crowd that I had there were upper crust women that that did not work because they iced me out so hard on these jokes. The feeling of losing a crowd is a wild feeling because you're like, yeah, we're cooking. There's a dialogue, we've got an energy, there's a flow, and then all of a sudden, gone. Like you are rejected across an entire room, and you're like, oh, well, oh my, I've got 40 minutes left in this set or whatever, like some huge amount of time
mm,
to figure it out. And you got to figure out how to get them back on board. And let me tell you, that is when you feel like you're hauling a rock up a hill. Try to figure out because you can't, like, I was like, what went wrong? I couldn't figure out in the moment what went wrong.
mm,
And so I was just like, okay, how am I going to figure out how to get back on track? And it was, I call it you flop sweat, like sweat starts happening from weird places on your body, like the
yeah.
part of your hair or like the side of your bicep, like places that aren't supposed to sweat.
Yeah. I know that's probably one of the hardest thing about a comedian is kind of tailoring your material to different areas because I know some certain places can be a little sensitive. What
Sure.
are like your favorite cities to perform in?
I tend, I would say that I tend to just always kind of gravitate towards, kind of cosmopolitan centers. I would say, I think this is a lot of people say that my set is, or my show in general, whatever you see, is very intelligent. They're like, oh, I love that it was very intelligent. And sometimes that is used against me. Like they're like, you're kind of too smart for this crowd. Which I mean, like, how did this happen? How is being smart now something that's terrible? How? Anyways,
Yeah.
it's very funny when that comes at me because honestly, I do think I have a level of intelligence, but I never in my life have I thought I was some sort of Rhodes Scholar genius at all. I
Mm.
was a mediocre student, solid B plus right here. So I find that very interesting when I do get that feedback. Oh, you're too smart for these people. What? So that just means that I feel like I do better in cities where you got a lot of culture and, a certain
Mm.
kind of population. However, I do feel like I've I'm going to call them second cities, and someone's probably with pride for wherever place I'm talking about is going to get mad that I love going to, like St. Louis or Birmingham, Alabama, or um, Charlotte. Like there's a bunch of places that they're cool places, and but you wouldn't necessarily be like, oh, that's a cultural epicenter.
Mm.
And the crowds are fantastic. And maybe it's part and parcel that not everyone rolls through there, and so you get this crowd that is really thirsty for the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that you have. And that's obviously very gratifying.
Now, I know you do so many things, plus being a parent.
Too many.
How do you how do you balance everything out without burning out
Oh, I
or
don't know. I need
feeling
help.
crazy?
I need help. Everywhere around me, I have lists, just lists. Are you a
Mm.
list maker? Do you make lists?
Yeah, I
Oh my
like
God.
check check boxes and checking them off. It gives me some satisfaction.
Yeah, a sense of control, forward movement. I have lists
Yeah.
everywhere. And then I feel like I have a list that says compile all your lists. Like I have an action item that is compile your lists. How inefficient is that? I've got lists and then I've lists about the lists. So endless listing. It's actually sometimes I just go, no lists. I want no lists today. I want no lists. I can't handle it. But I do, how do I balance it all? I think the answer is I do all of them a little poorly. Uh, because something I hate to say, but something's got to give. So
Yeah.
sometimes I am, and creative work requires a huge amount of focus.
Mm.
And so you get I think I've gotten a lot better at being like, it's 1 hour on this, try to make it uninterrupted and just no wavering and just dedicating that time. And that's what you have. But often it is just feeling like I'm dropping the ball in every different
Mm.
way. And I feel like I'm putting out fires. Every morning I get up, I'm like, I'm putting out fires. What is literally on fire right now that I said I would do and I have to
Mm.
do? And of course, my kid has to always come first.
Mm.
He's very aware that I go out at night for shows, and thankfully, for the most part, my husband is doesn't have an obligation, so he can stay at home. Sometimes I have to hire a babysitter, and you know, it's all fine, except for from a monetary point of view, coming home from a night of working, doing shows in the city, and then literally just handing that money over to a babysitter can feel really like, what did we even do here tonight?
Yeah.
So it's like it is a work in progress. I'm constantly looking for help on that. Time management strategies, new ways of doing things. And I think I've read stuff, I've listened to stuff. I don't know what your answer is, but I feel like the only answer is do less.
Yeah. I struggle with the same thing. It's like I don't do as many things as you, but it still feels like having my tentacles in so many things.
Yeah.
It makes everything slower because you're trying to push so many things at the same time when you're juggling all of these things. And I'm always interested in hearing, other people's strategy and what helps them keep focus and get in balance.
Yeah, and
I
I will
know
say, go ahead, sorry.
now I was gonna say one of the things that helped me for sure is like diet and um keeping like a meditation routine, certain things like that, spending time in nature, things like that, that
Yes.
help me like de-stress from all of that and kind of stay focused, but it's always good to hear other people's opinion on how to keep
Yeah,
it
I will
balanced.
say, the when I did, I have like a little exercise routine where it's literally 25 minutes, and I like to do
Mhm.
it at a gym just so I'm not, I have a small apartment, but even so, just to get out of it. Like I could just put a mat down in the middle of my living room for sure, but I like to just get out to switch it up. And even with those 25 minutes, not a lot of time. I skip it pretty often because it's so
Mhm.
easy for something else to take that space. And anytime I do it, even if during that workout I'm swearing in my head the whole time that I'm tired, I don't want to be there, you know, I I'm always better for it. Always.
Mhm.
And I always go like just every day 25, and I struggle to get it in, but every time I do it, it is a better day.
Yeah.
And I used to, just laugh that now I look forward to going to the gym. When I Before I had a child, I hated going to the gym, and I'd be like, oh, anything not to go to the gym. And I would always say, I don't have time. I don't have time. And then I had a kid and I was like, oh, I just didn't want to go. I had the time. I had all the time.
I feel like food makes a bigger dent in my energy than workout.
You're right.
That's why I tend to focus more on food. Like I went through a phase where I did like keto and intermittent fasting for like a 6 to 8 month period, and I had so much energy. I only needed like 4 to 6 hours of sleep. And
Wow.
had a lot of energy throughout the day to the point where when I eat is when I felt drained. So I realized, and that's why I started with intermittent fasting first. And then I realized whenever I ate, that made me crash. So I was like, okay, if I do keto diet on top of that, it can keep my energy level pretty good throughout the day. I don't do keto anymore, it's pretty extreme, but
Yeah.
I still keep the same practice of low carb, and that kind of helps my energy levels.
Right. Low carb, high protein. Is that
Yeah. Well, my diet is really weird because I've went into the rabbit holes of so many different things and experimented with myself and found like my own concoction of of a
okay?
diet that doesn't
Well,
have a name. So
okay. I
I
don't mean
try to
to
keep, go
interview
ahead.
you. I don't mind
No,
to,
go ahead. I
if
love
I
it.
may. So, like, just give me this. Like, let's just say, right after we do this interview, you have that, like, it's not quite time for dinner, but you've eaten lunch, let's say, and you're like, I need something. Like, I'm hungry. I want a snack. What's your go-to?
I'm not a big snacker, but when I do, it's like nuts.
Okay.
Like an almond, peanuts, it's a mixed bag of nuts, pistachio, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm very limited on like 80% of the grocery store is off limits to me, to be honest, because I avoid sugar. I don't
Right.
have,
Oh,
so
yeah.
which means I avoid most of the grocery store. So when it comes to snacking, it's really hard to find things that you can snack on that doesn't have sugar. So I keep it to like nuts, or fruits. I
Okay.
don't mind getting sugar from fruits. I know it has sugar, but I just feel like it's different. Your body needs it. So I'll do like some grapes or watermelon, something that's a little bit watery.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, those are my go-to snacks. I
Interesting.
don't
I
really
like it.
snack that much. Even as a kid, like that, I didn't like cakes or sweets or chips and things like that. So that made it easier for me. My biggest, um, my guilty pleasure is like bread and pasta.
Yes.
So
Oh,
that,
I mean, yeah, I don't have a big sweet tooth. Although I've noticed like you can give yourself a sweet tooth if
mm,
anytime like let's just say about holiday parties or whatever, and I feel like yes, of course I want to try your cheesecake that won the prize in your whatever, and then I eat sweets. I mean, of course they're delicious. Oh my goodness,
mm,
I will develop an addiction. I'm like, this is heroin because now I'm craving sweets all the time as someone who doesn't. And so anyone that says sugar isn't addictive is wrong.
yeah.
Very
Yeah,
addictive.
because I don't drink soda, but there's those rare times I'm like, sure, I'll taste some today. And it'll take like a whole week where I'm like thinking about it.
I know.
So I'm
Isn't that
like, no, that
crazy?
thing never, I'm not doing that again because it takes a whole week to stop thinking about it or craving it. So,
That is so wild. That is so wild. Mm-hmm.
and eggs is one of the things that take up a lot of my diet. I have it a million different ways, boiled eggs, and I experiment a lot with eggs and I can have it any time of day.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I try to stay low on meat. Like I don't get too much of my protein from meat. Even though I eat meat, I just like try to not eat as much of it. So keep my diet mostly fruits, vegetables, try to stay away from gluten. Yeah, it's a very complicated diet.
Yeah. Okay.
It
I
doesn't
like
have a
it.
name.
But you do it and it works for you and you figured it out.
It works because I'm like also trying to balance out hormones. And that's one of the things that I've spent a lot of time digging into, which affects everything in your body. And
Yeah.
sometimes you go to the doctor and they don't know what's wrong. That's because hormones are often messing with everything in your body. And
Yeah.
so I've had to
Especially for
figure
women.
out, yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I think they probably are for guys too on some level, but for women, it's like, yeah, at least now. And I will say, I am grateful because uh, for the internet and podcasts and things, because I do think right now we are getting a lot better at talking about this when it used to be sort of something that we seemed dirty and awful
yeah,
and like something you should be ashamed of to have any part of you affected by your hormones as a woman.
yeah. Yeah, I think hormones is something that really needs to be a big topic because when I was doing some research, it used to be more of a Western world issue, but now they're seeing places like India, I think places that are getting more industrialized are seeing the same issues where young people are experiencing some serious effects, like they're not having their periods or
Right.
they're infertile and things like that. Fertility issues is a big issue and PCOS and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's why I focus a lot on studying the hormones and how to balance it, and which is very complicated. It's not only diet, it's stress also messes with your cortisol, which is a hormone. And so
Yes.
that can throw you out of whack. And so that's when I got into like drinking certain types of teas, like spearmint helps you,
Mm-hmm.
calms you down, and them trying to keep a regular meditation practice just so it can, you don't realize sometimes, because I'm around a lot of people that don't meditate and they don't really get it. And I didn't either in the beginning. I find that when you meditate regularly and you stop doing it, that's when you realize the benefits that it was bringing to your life.
Funny.
Um,
Yeah.
you realize your mind is a little bit more chaotic, you're more anxious and things like that. But it's hard to tell um, when you're initially doing it, but when you practice it regularly and you stop, that's when you're like, oh, okay, so that's what it was doing for me.
So yeah, I do think to your point there, meditation. I mean, I think I sort of just was talking about something similar with like even just working out. But in general, the one thing that I can say, and this goes for my creative life too, consistency is everything. And unfortunately, when sometimes you're consistent about something, it does feel like, just you're like, it's a drop in the bucket. This is so insignificant, or today was hard, or like I feel like I'm making no progress. But it's so hard to see the sort of vastness of where you are going. Only when you stop do you go, because it's so hard to start again.
Yeah,
Yeah. So consistency is everything.
yeah, for sure. I actually have a brand, consistent self-improvement.
Really?
Shameless plug.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, fantastic. Yeah. All right. I'm in on that brand. What could I buy?
I create t-shirts. I'm working on like a fitness line. Pretty soon I'll be releasing, but that's a logo I add into different things like coffee cups and t-shirts and different things like that. It's just another reminder to consistently improve yourself, whether that's like your mind, your body, or career, whatever it is.
That's awesome. I love it.
So back to the comedy, what are your top five comedians?
Ooh, good question. I feel like I'm going to throw out some names there that some you might know, but some you might not. And it's just because I know so many great working comedians who have loads of television credits and specials and stuff, but they just might not be like top of mind, or as we say, household names. But one of my dead favorites is, and she's very much alive, is Maria Bamford. Totally different, like couldn't none of these people are like me either, which it's not like I'm looking at people that I'm like, she does my kind of stuff. And nobody's like Maria Bamford, just completely unique in every way. Fantastic. And she's done tons of television and specials, and just recently wrote a book. Great. Fantastic. I also really like this woman, also out of LA, actually, Jackie Cation. She is I will say she's also a friend, but I think I kind of stalked her to be a friend because I liked her. And she is very smart, little nerdy, which I love too. So I just like, again, endlessly can consume her stuff. There is a guy I work with on and off in New York that, again, when I first saw him, I was like, this is one of the funniest people alive. Why doesn't everyone know his name? And he has done a ton of television, has a special out now called, his name is Mike Vecchione. Just a joy. Another person going in kind of a different direction, who has been in the scene for a long time and, did specials for television back when I think like Showtime would do specials, is a woman, Judy Gold, who is, I think she would even call herself like a loudmouth. She's political. She's just super acerbic, very, very funny, has been on 1,000 different things. So great. And I am a long time lover and consumer of everything that Wanda Sykes does. And, I feel like right now I don't see her so much in my feed. I think she is touring a little bit again. But that was one of the first, I think that was like one of the first in New York, like big ticket comedy concerts I bought for myself. Because again, grew up in Canada, I didn't see any of these people live, honestly. So it was all just through television, because also it was before the age of the internet. So I had to watch stuff on television. And so I think she was playing, I think it was the Beacon Theater, which is a gorgeous theater. And I'm sure tickets now there are never under $100. But at the time, I think it was $40. And I was like, oh boy, $40. Like tomorrow it's going to be ketchup sandwiches, but let's do it. And it was inspiring to me because, yeah, I just never seen a show like that before. I never seen it, like, she's such a seasoned performer, and so just and a good storyteller, which I think at the time, all like storytelling and stand up, I feel like is having a real trendy kind of
Yeah.
resurgence. But there was a long time where it was it really was just like joke, joke, joke. Like if there wasn't just a line where someone wasn't laughing every 30 seconds, people weren't even sure if they could call it stand up.
Mm. Yeah, I think I like the storytelling
Yeah.
style. Do you feel like your style has changed from when you first started?
Yeah, I mean, I think, the one major way in which it changes is that in the beginning, it sounds so strange, but it's like you don't know who you are, or you don't know, as we say, what your voice is on stage. And you, and sometimes you try on different voices. Like you're like, well, maybe I'm more of a situational person. Maybe I'm I don't know. Now I'm being extreme. Maybe I'm a prop comic. Maybe I do silly voices. Do I tell the truth? Do I not tell the truth? Am I absurdist? Am I, and what I found is I think I was playing around and circling and trying to figure it out. And then I actually did something that was not in the stand-up field. I did storytelling because there was the Moth
Mm.
and storytelling shows and people doing storytelling throughout New York. And so I did that, which was it didn't even have to be funny. It was like get on stage and tell a 5-minute true story about your
Mm.
life, kind of in a little narrative arc in 5 minutes. And I loved that. And I got great feedback from it that it actually made me believe that what my normal, natural, um, unaffected voice was good enough. And I'd never put
Mm.
currency in myself like that. I was always in the stand-up stage being like, maybe I should be like this. Maybe I should be this kind of person. Maybe I need to be like the single gal, all about like, every executive, TV exec wants to put you in this little bucket so
Mm.
they can sell you with a line. But you know, maybe it hurt me overall in the marketing sense, but I was like, oh, I learned that like how I am going to succeed for myself is actually just be like throwing out who I am and trying to get behind that rather than manufacturing a personality.
Yeah. Did you ever get to go back to your hometown and perform after you gained some
I
success in New York?
have. Yeah, I
What
have.
was that like?
Well, the very first time I did it, I've done it a few times, and as time has gone forward, I've come back and played and been a better comic and played better venues. But the first time I came back was another comic invited me to come and do a show. We kind of self-produced a show in my hometown, and I hadn't performed in my hometown since I left. And not only that,
Mm.
I didn't keep in great touch with some people, but not with a lot of people. And strangely, a lot of people that I went to high school with, etc., stayed in Calgary. That's where they made their life. So we organized the show and we, put it out. I think at the time it was just Facebook. That was how you put out your show, Facebook, and created a Facebook invite and invited people. And let me tell you, people bought tickets, and it was
Mm.
I got on the stage, and I've never been more nervous in my entire life. It did not feel like doing a show. It felt like I was alive performing at my own funeral because it was like people from this part of my past and that part of my past. It was like the people that from my ballet years, the people from high school, some people from elementary, a collection of ex-boyfriends, just people, my mom and her senior friends, just up all, and then, the other women on the show, their people. And it was, you want to say that all these people are there to like celebrate you. And on one level, they are. But on another level, they're there for you to make laugh.
Mm.
And that was a whole other thing. And I remember thinking it was just very hard. I think in the end, I'll never have perspective on my own performance. But
Mm.
at the end of the day, I think it was just okay. I think that's how my performance went. I think I was just okay.
It was probably the pressure of performing in front of all the people
Oh,
that you've ever
so much pressure.
known.
So much pressure. And once you put that pressure on yourself, you're not free on
Mhm.
stage. You're just like, and something like a meditation practice and such really comes into play with that kind of stuff because it would, you got to step out of that and just be
Yeah,
like, here's what we're doing.
yeah. How did you get into your writing? And I love the title of your book. It's definitely an eye catcher. And tell me what that's about as well.
Oh yeah, so I wrote this book called Screw Everyone, Sleeping My Way to Monogamy. And I will tell you, it took a very long time to come up with that title. And I did come up with it after, I think it was after the fact. I'm pretty sure it was after the fact because that was a whole thing. I always loved writing. I feel like that's where I started. I was always writing as a kid through elementary school, stories, what now I would call like personal essays, memoir. I journaled. I even feel like I write less now because I used to just write so much. And I I think I kind of dreamed of being a writer on some level. I didn't know what that would look like, but I think I just liked it so much and I still like writing. And sometimes in my mind's eye when I do that thing about like, oh, if if whatever everything went away and I just had to do one thing or I was allowed, I didn't have to hustle and I could just
Mhm.
do one thing, would it be performing? I love performing, but I always come back to writing.
And is it an autobiography or
Mostly
fiction?
autobiography. Yeah, that's
Okay.
really where I find like I'm writing jokes all the time, but I love sitting down and um if I allow myself, it's always takes time, but I'll start with something small. I'll just be like, all right, this one scenario happened yesterday. I'm just going to write that out and see if there's anything there. And I always just feel whether it's worth it or not. Before I know it, I've written like a page and a half. And I'm like, God, this stuff always leads somewhere. And I love just giving myself space to go there and see where my brain takes me. But to your point, like meditation practice, if you don't do that every day, and there are many weeks where I just can't get to what I might call my writing practice, it gets harder and harder and harder. If you do it every day, you do get in a flow. And I always say it's like the distance. There's a distance between the page or the computer screen
Yeah.
and your brain. And all you're trying to do is bring those two things closer and closer together. And that's you get there with the practice. But if you stop doing it, or if you write once a month, you're so far away. You're
Yeah.
so far away and you got to work so much harder to get closer to it.
That's kind of how I feel about the podcast. I stopped for like a 10 months period.
Yeah.
I had a momentum going where it did like I had a co-host at the time, did like 99 episodes in 4 months, and then stopped for like 10 months. And
Yeah.
now I'm getting back into it without a co-host, and I'm just like, it takes some practice. I don't have there's some skill you gain from doing it consistently.
Absolutely.
And I feel out of practice when I'm first getting started now. So yeah, I can definitely speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Well, Ophira, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with? Any upcoming projects?
Yeah, sure. I mean, again, because I do too many things, there are
Yeah.
projects. But anyways, if so, just in general, if your listeners want to find out about what I'm up to, I do post on the socials regularly, so you can just follow me at Ophira E or go to my website, which is Ophira Eisenberg. I know it's a hard name, but you can figure it out. I believe in you, Ophira Eisenberg. And also, if you I mean, parents listen to this podcast, but I also have a lot of non-parent listeners. I do a podcast weekly called Parenting is a Joke, where I talk to other parents who are primarily stand-up comics. Others are uh, celebrities and the people that are, great actors that are working in the funny field. And we talk about being creative, working in entertainment, and raising a family, the chaos of all of that. put together. So you can check that out every week.
Yeah, I think parenting stuff is funny even when you're not a parent.
Well, we all know what it's like to be a kid, and
Yeah,
we
exactly.
certainly all of us grew up in some sort of scenario where there was a
Yeah.
parent or a parental figure. So
Well, for the listeners, we'll have Ophira's information on the description. And as always, you can find us on any podcast platform or AmericanGypsy.com. If you would like to be on the show, you can email AmericanGypsy@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and thank you, Ophira, for being on the show.
thank you so much for having me.
Peace.